My name is Jessica Harper. I'm 39 years old. Right now, I'm standing in the back corner of a lavish conference hall, blinking under chandeliers that cost more than my first car. Everyone's dressed in black tie, glass flutes of champagne in hand, voices raised in celebration. There's a stage up front. Lights, applause, CEO with a mic, and a giant projector screen rotating through flashy stats and cheesy team photos. None of which include me. So, before you listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. Now, let's ease into the story together. The slide on screen flashes, $322 billion in annual revenue, Titan Core's best year yet. You'd think I'd be proud. I should have been. After all, I built the operational strategy that made this possible. 4 years of late nights, ruthless reorganizing, and introducing modular infrastructure that sliced onboarding times in half. 4 years of eating takeout at my desk while others went home to families. 4 years of shielding us from system meltdowns and customer churn. Titan Core was a mess when I got here. Clients leaving, internal tools outdated by a decade. DevOps pipeline stitched together with duct tape. They brought me in quietly. Director of Strategic Operations, no press, no warm welcome, because they didn't want to admit they needed saving, and I saved them anyway. I remember the first time someone said, "Jessica's team doesn't deploy code, they deploy confidence." I wrote that down on a sticky note and kept it in my drawer. I had it framed actually, not because I needed flattery, but because it was true. It was what I built. So yeah, I expected a little recognition. What I got instead was an email. Subject line, compensation change notice. I blinked. Maybe a bonus confirmation, I thought. Some corporate phrasing error. But no, it was a reduction, a 15% salary cut. To better reflect internal equity following organizational realignment, the email read. I looked up, still holding my phone, and watched the CEO, Robert Kendall, raise his glass and toast to visionaries and future leaders. I scanned the screen behind him. A slideshow ran with portraits of people who hadn't even been here 2 years. I wasn't there, not even in the background. I was standing 20 feet away, and no one looked at me. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, but something inside me crystallized, sharp and cold, because I realized in that moment that I had already been written out of the story. The demotion had started quietly. I stopped receiving calendar invites. Strategy meetings happened without me. Teams I built were reporting elsewhere, now under a new division called Digital Transformation, a glossy title for a power grab. And heading that new office? Samantha Kendall, Robert's daughter. She was 26, just out of Stanford, with a philosophy degree and a LinkedIn bio that read like a TED Talk in emoji. We'd met twice. At a fundraiser once, she'd asked if Titan Core's APIs ran on blockchain. I said APIs weren't currencies. She didn't appreciate the correction. Apparently, she remembered. But the worst part wasn't Samantha or the pay cut. It wasn't the erasure. It was the quiet realization that this had all been decided long before the revenue celebration. I was never part of the future plan. I was a fixer, a cleanup crew. Fixers don't get promotions. They get replaced. As the slideshow ended with digital fireworks and applause, someone handed me a glass of champagne. I didn't drink it, just watched the bubbles spiral up and vanish. No one noticed when I left early, not even my team. I walked past the valet in heels that pinched, my shoulders stiff under a blazer I used to wear into investor meetings. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't punch the steering wheel, but something in my gut started to move. Something slow, something calculating. Because I knew a secret, one they had forgotten. The architecture behind Titan Core's SaaS platform, the framework that powered every integration and client dashboard. It wasn't just some plug-and-play backbone. It had a heartbeat, one I had personally built, refined, and, most importantly, licensed. Not donated. And that heartbeat, it was starting to stutter. The HR office smelled like lemon-scented disinfectant and stale coffee. The kind of environment that tries to say welcoming, but really just screams controlled. I showed up 5 minutes early for what the email called a collaborative next steps check-in. I knew what it really was, a performance funeral scheduled in Outlook. Claire Stanton from HR greeted me with that brittle smile people save for uncomfortable truths. She gestured toward the tiny round table in the corner instead of her desk. That alone told me everything. It's a power move. When you sit side by side, it's a conversation. When there's a desk between you, it's a judgment. She folded her hands on a pastel notepad and began. We wanted to talk about your next chapter here at Titan Core. I didn't say a word. Claire went on. We think your experience makes you the ideal candidate for a more mentorship-focused role. Less hands-on, more legacy-driven. Legacy. What a beautiful word for burial. She kept smiling. You'd still be involved in key initiatives, but from an advisory angle, supporting new leadership, offering guidance without the pressure of ownership. Translation, you're being put out to pasture. I finally spoke, letting the word advisory roll off my tongue with just enough weight to make her pause. Yes, she chirped, exactly. I asked who made this decision. Claire hesitated. Leadership consensus, she said carefully. It's part of a broader transformation. Future-forward structures, you know. I didn't respond. Silence, I found, can be its own language. Claire adjusted a paperclip that didn't need adjusting. Then she delivered the finishing blow. We'd love your help transitioning the team. You'll still have system access. Nothing changes overnight. But everything had already changed. When I walked back upstairs, the 7th-floor glass meeting room, once my territory, was glowing with a morning strategy session. Through the glass, I spotted Kelsey Reed. Kelsey had been our summer intern just last year, fresh out of college. Eager, wide-eyed, a bit nervous, but smart. I'd taken time to coach her on our deployment models and even let her shadow a client pitch once. Now she was in my seat, literally. Same leather swivel chair, same whiteboard at her back. And sitting beside her, nodding with theatrical enthusiasm, Samantha Kendall, the heiress to Titan Core's throne. Kelsey was talking, her tone practiced, her gestures rehearsed. I could practically hear the slides in her head. I stood there for 5 seconds, unseen, unwanted, unnecessary. Then I walked away. Not that they noticed. The rest of the day was a flood. Handoff emails, files I had written, processes I'd spent months perfecting, all forwarded with polite subject lines like, looping you in and for visibility. It wasn't a collaboration, it was a transfer of power. I was still CC'd on messages. That was supposed to make it feel inclusive. It felt more like exile with red receipts. By 3 p.m., my badge no longer opened the executive server folders. By 4 p.m., I was dropped from the director's weekly sync. By 5 p.m., I saw it. The org chart had updated. Senior Strategic Advisor, Legacy Initiatives, Jessica Harper. There it was again, legacy. Claire hadn't been lying. They hadn't stripped me of my title. They had embalmed it. Later that evening, a cheerful IT tech named Jordy asked if I needed help resettling into the shared project pod. Resettling. As if I were an old chair they didn't want to throw out, but didn't know where else to put. I sat at the temporary desk for the rest of the week. No plaques, no framed sticky notes. No drawer for my favorite pens or the stress ball shaped like a neuron that my team gave me after our big logistics client signed. Just a thin desk between me and the rest of the cubicle shadows. I watched quietly as Kelsey tried to imitate my leadership style, delegating too quickly, confusing microservices with endpoints, laughing a little too loudly in meetings where she didn't understand the subtext. She wasn't ready, but that didn't matter anymore. She had youth, she had proximity to power, she had a CEO's daughter smiling beside her. And me? I had something they didn't even know was valuable yet. They made a mistake, a small one, a subtle one. But in software, even one missing semicolon can bring the whole thing down. You see, in their rush to replace me, they forgot something essential. Titan Core's SAS engine, the logic trees, the load balancers, the unique compression algorithms, I hadn't built it for them. I had built it with them and licensed it to them. There's a difference. And they never bothered to check the renewal clause. There's something strange about being erased in real time, not fired, not yelled at, not walked out by security. Just quietly removed, dismantled, soft deletion. Everywhere I turned, it was like someone had photoshopped me out of the picture. At first, I tried to pretend it wasn't personal. Companies evolve, people rotate. But then I walked into the micro kitchen and my name was missing from the coffee pod subscription list. A small thing, sure, but I had managed that service for 3 years. No one had said anything, they just canceled my order. I sat in the shared workspace with the kind of numb detachment that settles in when you're surrounded by buzzwords, but no belonging. That's when I got the second email. Mentorship Framework, Proposed Guidelines for Legacy Advisors. It was addressed to me and 5 other senior staff members who had also mysteriously gone from leaders to legacy. One of them, a man named Arjun I'd worked with since my first week, responded with a thumbs-up emoji. I stared at it for 10 minutes. They weren't just fading me out. They were grouping us, categorizing us like archival folders. We weren't people anymore, we were artifacts. Fragments of a company narrative they were actively rewriting. I left the office early that day, not out of frustration, but because something inside me was whispering. An instinct I hadn't felt in years. I went home, changed into sweats, and sat cross-legged on my living room floor. No music, no wine, just silence, boxes, and the low hum of the refrigerator. I hadn't touched these boxes in ages. Old files, notebooks, tech conference badges, hand-sketched system maps. At some point, these scraps of paper had been my entire life. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I just needed to remember what I'd actually built and why. Then I found it. A folder marked Onyx Alpha Personal Copy. It was one of the original blueprint packets I'd developed, funded out of my own pocket, because Titan Core's budget approval had come too late and I wasn't willing to lose our last logistics client. Inside was the contract. The license agreement. I had almost forgotten. 3 years ago, I had licensed my proprietary modular rollout system to Titan Core for emergency deployment, subject to renewal by the original legal entity, me. I flipped to the final clause. Failure to renew within 21 days of expiration will result in full system lockout and automatic deactivation of core services. There was my signature, and no one else's. I blinked, slowly, read the line again and again. They had forgotten, or maybe they assumed it was just paperwork, but it wasn't, it was control. The moment hit me like cold water down the back. They stripped my title, cut my pay, wrote me out of every room, but they missed one detail. I still held the keys. And in less than 3 weeks, their entire infrastructure would hit a wall because they had failed to renew a license they didn't even realize they needed. I closed the folder, slid it back into the box, and tucked the box under my couch. There was no need to bring it into the office. No need to confront anyone. No need to make noise. Let them continue forward. Let them high-five Kelsey. Let Robert promote Samantha with full-page spreads in the company digest. Let them edit me out. Because I wasn't just the builder. I was the heartbeat. And they'd forgotten to keep it alive. Back at work, the days passed quietly. I nodded when people passed me in the hallway, smiled when someone asked if I was enjoying my new advisory freedom. I watched as Samantha strutted into meetings with unearned swagger, and Kelsey began mirroring her, heels a little higher, voice a little louder. I said nothing. But each evening, I opened my laptop. Line by line, I began extracting the parts of my architecture that had never truly belonged to them. Not deleting, not sabotaging, just reclaiming. Some modules were APIs that quietly harmonized background sync calls. Others were failover protocols that no one realized were running because they'd never not worked. Every line was mine, licensed, undocumented, proprietary. And now? They were gone. Glitches started small. A delay in the analytics dashboard loading, a client-facing chart that refused to refresh. Samantha's assistant posted in Slack. Anyone else having issues with the Delta tab again? No one replied for a few minutes, then someone suggested a cache purge. Someone else blamed the VPN, classic finger-pointing. I just watched. That Delta tab? It ran on an experimental query engine I had built in my second year, one that dynamically redistributed server load during peak usage. It wasn't open source. It wasn't documented. and it had just been one of the first modules I'd reclaimed. By Wednesday, the minor hiccups evolved into performance lag. Some of the sales team's live demo tools froze mid-pitch. Clients started calling in, confused, frustrated. And the team, they were scrambling, patch this, roll back that, reroute traffic. But you can't patch what you don't understand. And the system was unraveling like a sweater someone kept pulling from the bottom. I didn't feel triumphant. I wasn't out for destruction. This wasn't revenge, not really. It was reclamation. I wasn't breaking Titan Core. I was just taking back the pieces of me they'd embedded in the foundation and assumed they'd never have to acknowledge again. But systems are like bodies. You remove an organ, even a small one, and everything else starts working harder to compensate. By Friday, chaos had grown legs. Kelsey was walking around in 4-inch heels now, like the sound of them alone would command respect. Click, click, click. Every hallway stroll was a performance. I passed her in the stairwell once. She gave me a polite nod. I returned it with a half smile. That same afternoon, I overheard her in the analytics room during a team sync. I think we need to sunset some of the legacy logic. It's been causing data artifacts. I flagged the Harper modules for review. The Harper modules. She said it like I was a deprecated library, outdated, obsolete, something to be swept away so she could build her paper palace on a clean slate. I paused outside the door, taking a breath. She didn't know. She couldn't know. Later that day, I waited until the floor was nearly empty. Then I walked into the server interface room, the brain of Titan Core's entire client dashboard suite. 2 junior analysts were still logged in, scanning lines of errors they clearly didn't understand. Kelsey was in there too, typing fast, her face flushed with determination. I waited until she noticed me. She blinked. "Jessica," she said, surprised. "Didn't expect to see you here." I ignored the pleasantry and walked toward the terminal. The logs were flashing red. Reconciliation processes were throwing memory errors left and right. "You disabled the legacy reconcilers," I said calmly. She hesitated. "I was told they weren't essential anymore." "By who?" No answer. I turned to the intern beside her, who looked like he wanted to disappear. I softened my voice. "You're seeing errors because the system is reverting to default sync logic. It can't handle currency drift between multi-point APIs without the mapping layer." She stared at me, defensive. The docs said, "There are no docs," I interrupted. "That's the problem." I leaned in, quiet but firm. "You don't lead by removing what you don't understand. You stabilize first, then evolve." And then I walked out, leaving them to stew in the weight of it. Behind me, the dashboard flickered again, another glitch in a growing pile. Kelsey didn't know it yet, but the system was rejecting her. Not out of malice, but out of misfit, like a transplant that didn't take. And when it collapsed, she'd be standing dead center, heels and all. The weekend arrived like a held breath finally released. I didn't go into the office. I didn't check Slack. I didn't respond to the friendly reminder from HR about submitting my mentorship goals. Instead, I walked along the waterfront. Let the breeze tangle my hair. Thought about all the code I had written, not out of obligation, but out of obsession. Late nights when no one asked me to stay. Systems I crafted not for performance reviews, but because I wanted elegance, order, brilliance in the backbone of something that could last. They didn't understand the difference between ownership and authorship. But they were about to learn. Because in less than 2 weeks, the heartbeat would stop. Not with a bang. With a whisper. By Monday morning, the whisper had become a murmur. Titan Core's systems were starting to bleed data inconsistencies like a slow puncture. Not enough to cause full failure, yet, but enough to rattle everyone just beneath the surface. I watched from a distance as threads in the engineering Slack lit up. Weird delay in CRM autosync. Client activity logs not matching usage reports. Do we have eyes on API versioning conflicts? Something feels off. Each message was a breadcrumb leading back to the same place, the infrastructure I had architected. Except now, piece by piece, it was reverting to default logic. Slower, stupider, brittle. No one saw the connection. They couldn't. Because the person who knew how the puzzle fit together, how each microservice aligned like vertebrae to keep the system upright, was already written out of the org chart. And yet, there I was, still holding the blueprint. I didn't reply to the messages. I didn't offer to jump in real quick like I once would have. That part of me, the fixer, the hero, the silent backbone, she was gone. Instead, I read every frantic post with eerie calm. Kelsey kept posting updates like a toddler with a toy steering wheel, convinced she was driving the bus. Team, I flagged the reconciliation scripts, reviewing fallback options. Fallback options? There weren't any. Because fallback logic hadn't been part of the contract. Titan Core had never paid for redundancy. They'd paid for performance and assumed permanence. By midweek, clients started calling support. Not screaming, not threatening, just confused. Why does our dashboard load differently than last month? Where are the historical forecasts? Is your API throttling by region now? They didn't realize what they were seeing wasn't degradation, it was regression. A living system forgetting how to function without the code I'd once laced into its nervous system. And the teams? Still scrambling. Still patching symptoms without understanding the disease. Robert Kendall, the CEO, held an emergency sync with the director tier. I wasn't invited, of course, but an old friend forwarded me a screenshot of the shared agenda. Incident summary, legacy systems interference. I laughed out loud. Legacy interference. What a poetic way to say we forgot who made the house and now the lights don't work. Meanwhile, Samantha was conveniently on vacation. A quiet escape while the palace she inherited started cracking at the foundation. And Kelsey? She was unraveling. I could see it in the way she walked. Less click, more clomp. No more big shoulder power strides. Just rushed steps, her blazer misbuttoned, eyes darting like a hunted animal. I crossed paths with her near the elevators. "Jessica," she said, startled. I tilted my head. "Something wrong?" She hesitated. "There's a lot going on with the platform. I think there's some bad logic buried in the old modules." "Buried?" I asked softly. She looked unsure. I mean, outdated. I stepped closer, not threatening, just present. "Kelsey," I said gently, "what you're experiencing isn't sabotage. It's design, and you were never meant to steer it." She blinked. "You want to lead? Learn to build, not replace." I walked away before she could respond. Later that evening, I received an email. Subject, not a coincidence. From Greg Kim. Time, Saturday, 10:03 p.m. Message. "Jessica, I know you're probably not checking these anymore, but what's happening? Feels like the whole system is rejecting us. If this is what I think it is, I just wanted to say you were right. About everything." I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. I wasn't part of the system anymore. I wasn't in the meetings, or the dashboards, or the hallway photos. And that was the most powerful position I'd ever held. Because they tried to make me invisible. But now, they were learning what it really meant to live without me. By the time the next week rolled around, the chaos had a name. Outages, data drift, API mismatches. The buzzwords were multiplying like cracks in a glass tower no one knew how to fix. Teams blamed each other. Sales pointed at IT. IT pointed at DevOps. DevOps blamed legacy logic. And still, the heartbeat of Titan Core stuttered. But it wasn't a bug. It was the absence of a person. I watched all of this unfold from my small apartment, wrapped in a blanket, sipping lukewarm coffee. The logs told the real story. Error rates ballooning in key systems. Load times tripled. Clients complaining that core functionalities felt off or unreliable. And through it all, Titan Core leadership kept preaching optimism. "We're streamlining. We're in transition. We'll be stronger on the other side." But transitions don't fail silently. They scream when they fall. It was surreal watching the very machine I'd kept alive for years now stutter like a skipped record, each glitch a syllable in a sentence they didn't understand. And Chloe, sorry Kelsey, was in the thick of it, still smiling in meetings like her ship wasn't sinking. Her voice a little more shrill, her tone laced with desperation she hadn't quite masked yet. I almost felt bad. Almost. Then I remembered overhearing her say she'd flagged Harper's modules for deletion. Funny how they're always Harper's when things go wrong, but never when the systems run flawlessly. That Friday, the dam broke. 3 of Titan Core's largest clients filed official complaints. One of them, a big logistics conglomerate, posted a brutal thread on LinkedIn that went viral. We were promised world-class infrastructure. Today, our team had to rebuild from scratch. Never again. The post was shared thousands of times. Then it hit tech blogs, then Twitter, then the stock price. Down 12% in a single day. Inside the Titan Core offices, panic set in. Escalation threads burned through Slack. I saw screenshots forwarded from old allies. Emergency failover not responding. Who has root access logs? Is Jessica Harper still on any of our legacy contracts? Too late. By then, the core services were unraveling like a sweater pulled at the wrong thread. My scripts, no longer present, had been the glue. Failover systems, predictive load balancing, reconciler queues. Gone. The system wasn't down, it was confused. Like a machine speaking a language it never fully understood, pretending it could still function. And Kelsey? Silent. She had stopped posting her bubbly updates. Her Slack icon was marked away more than active. Her desk, I heard, was increasingly empty. Even Samantha had retreated. Rumor was she was working remotely to focus on high-level strategy. Sure. And I was just a legacy advisor. I knew what was coming next, not because I was vindictive, but because I knew the architecture better than anyone ever would. Every outage, every customer complaint, every missed sync or broken integration, it was a death rattle. The echo of what happens when a company builds its future on a foundation it doesn't understand. And the real kicker? This wasn't sabotage. This was dependency. They didn't just need the code, they needed me, my instincts, my strategy, my obsessive attention to edge cases no one else even noticed. And they threw that away for optics. So I waited. I didn't need to poke the wound. I just needed to give it time. By the end of the week, another client terminated their contract early. The internal Slack channels were locked down. Staff were told to stop using the word outage and start saying performance inconsistency. A friend sent me a photo of the all-hands meeting. You could see it in Robert Kendall's eyes. Fear, the kind of fear that comes when the thing you thought you owned suddenly stops answering to you. In the middle of all that mess, my phone buzzed. It was Nora Bennett. I hadn't heard from her in years. Nora was the kind of executive people either adored or feared. Once offered me a leadership position when her company, Vaunt Technologies, was just breaking into enterprise SaaS. I'd turned her down, too loyal to Titan Core. Too loyal to the wrong people. But Nora didn't hold grudges. She just moved forward, quietly, intentionally. We met at a quiet cafe. No suits, no NDA. Just heavy ceramic mugs and pressed linen napkins. She didn't waste time. I want to make you an offer, she said. Not a job, not a title, a runway. I raised an eyebrow. I've been watching what you built, she continued. Your system was clean, modular, beautiful. And what you did to extract it, brilliant. But what you could build, Jessica, without constraints, without sabotage, that's what I want. You want to buy the system, I asked. I want to partner with its creator. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked out the window as a breeze played with the corner of a napkin. I didn't feel bitterness, or anger, or even revenge. I felt free. For the first time in years, I wasn't calculating how to stay relevant in someone else's empire. I was imagining my own. I turned back to Nora and smiled. Let's talk terms. The old Titan Core server room still looked the same. Cold, humming with soft machine energy, its rows of servers blinking gently like a city at night. The room never cared about titles or office politics. It cared about uptime, about clean logic and continuity. It was strange, walking back in after so long. I wasn't escorted. No one had revoked my hardware access, not yet. probably an oversight in the chaos. Or maybe they didn't think I'd bother returning. But I wasn't there to cause trouble. I was there to finish something. I walked down the narrow aisle, every footstep echoing just slightly over the soft white noise of the fans. My fingers trailed against the cold metal of the server racks, as if saying goodbye. In the far corner, there was a small desk tucked behind a wall of routers. No one used it anymore, but I did, once. Late nights, emergency pushes, quiet moments of clarity where my best ideas had lived and breathed. I set my bag down. From it, I pulled a thick folded piece of cardstock, my original architecture map, the real one, not the chopped-up version hidden in internal wikis and meeting decks. The first, precise draft, my skeleton, my spine. And beside it, a sealed envelope. My resignation? No. This was a closure protocol. An artifact? I wasn't here to gloat or sabotage. I wasn't cutting power or frying circuits. I was simply returning what had always been mine, and formally ending the rental agreement they never thought to renew. The final submodules had already been pulled from the live systems. This was the last tether, the root key, the one connection they never questioned because they never understood how deep it ran. I slipped the envelope under the terminal keyboard. Then I stood. As I turned to leave, the hallway door opened, and there she was. Kelsey. Clipboard in hand, hair pulled back tight, eyes wide with panic she was trying desperately to disguise as control. We froze. She looked at me like she was seeing a ghost. "Jessica," she said, voice low. Her shoes clicked unevenly on the tile as she stepped closer, unsure if she should be nervous, apologetic, or defensive. "You're here?" I looked her over, creased blazer, breath just a bit too quick. She was unraveling, and she knew it. "Are you fixing something?" she asked. I gave a small smile, soft but final. "No," I said, "I'm finishing something." Her brows knit, confused. I didn't explain. She wouldn't have understood. I stepped past her without another word, the smell of warm plastic and recirculated air lingering on my coat. The elevator ride down was quiet, slower than I remembered. Or maybe I was just ready now, not angry, not bitter, just done. They could erase me from their charts, their speeches, their credits. They could promote new faces, build new slide decks, write new origin stories. But they couldn't undo the truth. The heart of their success, every optimization, every smart module, every bit of logic that saved them millions, it had always been me. And now it was gone. It didn't collapse all at once. That's the myth people tell themselves. Real collapse is quiet at first. Hairline fractures beneath marble, a slight creak before the shatter. But once it starts, it doesn't stop. Back in my apartment, I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving, not for celebration, for closure. Across the city, Titan Core's recovery scripts were already failing. Systems trying to reboot without the backbone I had given them. Failover logic was panicking, defaulting to redundancies that didn't exist anymore. Departments were now running reports based on corrupted datasets they didn't even know were wrong. They would try to fix it, throw bodies at it, but it wouldn't work. Because you can't fix what you never understood in the first place. Over the next 2 days, 3 major clients announced they were leaving. One posted a particularly brutal comment online. "We were sold brilliance and delivered confusion. Infrastructure this fragile doesn't break overnight. It was always broken. We just didn't see it." That one went viral. Stock dropped again. Robert Kendall went radio silent. Samantha was unreachable. Kelsey, now visibly shaken. Her confident strut reduced to hurried whispers and disappearing hallway walks. Inside Titan Core, shouting had replaced celebration. The silence was gone, replaced with blame. No one knew who to trust. Everyone was trying to trace the collapse like it was a mystery. But there was no mystery. Just a single fact no one wanted to say aloud. They had depended on a woman they erased. And she took herself back. The launch wasn't flashy. No dramatic countdown, no confetti cannons, no corporate hype reel. Just a sleek looping animation on the screen behind me, and a quiet hum of anticipation from the audience. Vaunt Technologies had rented a minimalist venue downtown. Floor-to-ceiling glass, brushed steel finishes, every chair positioned with surgical precision. The kind of place built for ideas, not ego. I walked out onto the stage wearing a simple black blazer, soft blouse, and flats. No need for heels. My presence didn't need height. There was no music, no voiceover, just me. And for a few long seconds, silence. Then whispers. Recognition flickered across some faces. Others squinted, nudged the people next to them. Jessica Harper. Wasn't she the one from Titan Core? Didn't she disappear? The moment felt surreal, like stepping back into a room that once locked you out, only now the keys were yours. I smiled. Not for them, for me. Because this wasn't a comeback. This was a coronation. The screen behind me displayed one word in sleek serif font. Vaunt. The future of adaptive intelligence. I didn't give a TED Talk. I didn't quote market trends or Gartner charts. I spoke plainly. I told them about control, about ownership, about building something not because you had to, but because you believed in it. And then I showed them what we built. The platform was modular, scalable, lean. Every flaw I'd been forced to work around at Titan Core had been turned into a strength. No legacy bloat. No power-hungry middle managers requesting features they didn't understand. Just clarity. After the presentation, the buzz was instant. People were already tweeting. Jessica Harper. Vaunt rising. The architect returns. I didn't read all the comments. I didn't need to. Because as I stepped off the stage, Nora was waiting in the wings. Her eyes gleamed. That, she whispered, wasn't a launch. That was a reckoning. I smiled. Not for revenge, not for validation. For peace. For the first time in years, I was free. Not just from Titan Core, from the version of myself that begged for recognition, who kept saving people who didn't value the lifelines I threw. I had built something clean. And this time, no one else would own it. I didn't need to be at war with Titan Core anymore. They were already losing. Not because of me, but because they'd built their empire on bones they never respected. Kelsey was still there, technically. Still holding meetings, still managing the slow-motion car crash from the inside. But something had changed in her. She stopped walking loudly. She stopped smiling in meetings. I imagined she finally understood what she'd been sitting on all along, a chair carved by someone else's hands, and now that chair was crumbling beneath her. Samantha had gone dark. No new LinkedIn posts, no glossy updates about vision-driven transformation, just silence. And Robert? Rumors swirled about executive restructuring, but I didn't care enough to confirm. I was no longer looking backward. I stood that night on the rooftop terrace of Vaunt's new headquarters. 4 stories of clean wood, curved glass, and intentional silence. The air was cool. The city stretched out before me like a circuit board, lit up in amber. Nora joined me. She said something about investors calling nonstop. I didn't flinch at the praise. I had learned not to need it. What mattered was this. Every diagram had my name on it now. Every function bore my initials in the commit logs. Every system pulsed with logic I had authored. And when I walked into a room, people listened, not because they were told to, but because they chose to. That's not power. That's presence. Kelsey watched Vaunt from a distance. Product demos, press releases, quiet awe. She never reached out. Never apologized. But I think she wanted to. She didn't push me out maliciously, not intentionally. But when people hand out titles like candy, they forget the cost, the weight of the work, the value of experience. She'd admired me once, laughed with me in the break room, asked for advice. But when the ladder appeared, she climbed without looking down. And when Titan Core began to sink, she realized too late, she hadn't been trained to swim. And I had learned to fly. Collapse doesn't always come with alarms. Sometimes it comes with silence. That's what Titan Core became. Quiet, not calm, not steady, just subdued, like a city after a storm where everyone's still inside, wondering if it's safe to come out. I heard things, of course. People talk, screenshots get forwarded. Old teammates still on the inside sent the occasional cryptic message. Samantha hasn't been seen in weeks. They just fired half the DevOps team. They want to rebrand the platform entirely. Too late. The brand was broken. Not by me, but by their own hubris. When you build a kingdom on borrowed bricks and dismiss the architect, don't be surprised when the foundation gives out. The collapse hadn't been sabotage, it was inevitability. Every report that failed to load, every customer dashboard that spat out corrupted data, every automated email that never sent, those were warning signs. They called them glitches. I called them ghosts. The last modules I removed had been surgical. Memory optimization tools, service dependency bridges, request throttlers, invisible supports. They never made it into documentation, never got featured in a product demo. But they held the whole damn thing together. Titan Core tried to fix it. They hired outside consultants, rebuilt teams, reassigned titles. One of their announcements even claimed they were pioneering a clean slate architecture for 2026. Translation? They were starting over. Because they had no choice. Meanwhile, Vaunt surged. Investors noticed, clients noticed. More importantly, people remembered. They remembered the name Jessica Harper. She wasn't just some mid-tier director who got shuffled into legacy advisory. She was the brain behind the platform they once praised. Now, I wasn't just trending in obscure tech circles. Major publications started calling. Wired, Fast Company, The Verge. The questions were always the same. Did you plan this collapse? Do you feel vindicated? What advice would you give to other women in tech who've been erased? I answered carefully. I hadn't burned anything down. I just stopped holding up a structure that no longer saw me. There's a difference between stepping back and pushing something over. One of the interviews went viral. I said, sometimes the most radical thing you can do is remove yourself. Simple, quiet, true. That quote ended up on posters, tweets, even a mural in a co-working space downtown. Meanwhile, Kelsey kept showing up to work. Not because she believed in the mission anymore, but because she didn't know where else to go. The office was smaller now, less vibrant, more brittle, fewer meetings, no more glossy town halls. People started whispering about jumping ship. Recruiters were poaching talent. Kelsey replayed every conversation in her head. Every moment she could have spoken up. Every chance to ask questions, to resist the narrative, to see me clearly before I vanished. But she hadn't. Not because she was cruel, but because ambition is loud and respect, real respect, is quiet. And when you're young, loud often wins. Now she sat at a desk I once occupied, surrounded by pieces of a system she couldn't fix, with clients canceling contracts and dashboards flickering like dying stars. Titan Core didn't just lose me. They lost themselves. Because what they failed to realize is that innovation doesn't live in title slides or C-suite bios. It lives in code, in clarity, in people who care too much and work too late and get passed over anyway. And when those people leave, all you're left with is the shell. I didn't watch their full collapse, didn't need to. Because I was already somewhere else, on calls, in meetings, sketching blueprints on whiteboards that didn't require permission to exist. Vaunt was growing. Fast. But this time I wasn't chasing speed. I was chasing alignment, culture, respect, integrity. Nora made sure of that. We built intentionally. Every engineer had a voice. Every module had a purpose. No fluff, no theater. One night I stayed late, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to. The office was dark except for my desk lamp. I was refining a piece of logic that optimized adaptive AI responses. It was elegant. Precise. I sat back, let out a breath, and realized I wasn't tired. I wasn't overworked. I was fulfilled. Titan Core once drained everything from me, my energy, my joy, my identity. Vaunt gave it back. Not because they let me lead, but because they never questioned whether I should. I don't believe in perfect endings, but I do believe in earned ones. It was just after sunset, the sky a dusky mix of lavender and gold, when I stepped out onto the rooftop terrace of Vaughn's headquarters. 4 stories of clean glass, curved wood, and warm lighting, like someone had designed the space not just to impress, but to breathe. Below, the city pulsed as usual, but up here, it was calm, intentional. Nora stood beside me, sipping tea instead of wine, always sharp, always composed. She looked at me, not as a boss, not even as a peer, as a partner. I meant what I said, she told me. You didn't just build Vaughn's backbone, you redefined how we think about resilience. I smiled, genuinely this time. Not out of modesty or that old instinct to downplay my impact, but because I didn't need to prove it anymore. The proof was in the silence. The kind that only comes after a storm clears, when the ground is still wet, but the air feels clean. I had survived Titan Core. But more than that, I had outgrown them. Not with fire, with flight. Meanwhile, across town, Kelsey sat at what used to be my desk. She no longer wore heels. She no longer smiled in that overly rehearsed way. The office was emptier now. The buzz had dulled. She watched Vaughn from afar, product launches, sleek demo videos, social clips where my name was casually dropped like a known entity. Sometimes I imagine her hovering over her keyboard, debating whether to send an email she never writes. Something short, maybe even heartfelt. But she never does. And that's okay. Because closure isn't about the apology. It's about the clarity. She understands now what I was, what she let happen, what she participated in by staying silent while I was erased. She used to think I was just her mentor. Now she knows I was her shield. And when they dismantled me, they left her exposed to the same system. I don't hate her. I just don't need her validation. Titan Core will survive, probably, in some neutered, rebranded form. They'll hire firms, rebuild pieces, repaint their homepage. But they'll never get back what they lost. Because I didn't destroy anything. I just took myself back. And you know what? That's enough. To the people who thought I'd crumble, I didn't. To the ones who thought I'd stay silent, I didn't. To those who thought I'd fade away quietly, I didn't. I rose. To Robert, Samantha, Kelsey, if you're listening, I don't wish you failure. I just hope you've learned the value of the people who build in silence, who solve problems without showmanship, who anchor your success without demanding the spotlight. For me, this story isn't about revenge. It's about reclamation, rebuilding, and finally becoming untouchable, not because I'm vengeful, but because I'm whole. How about you? Have you ever been pushed aside, overlooked, replaced? How did you handle it? What was the outcome? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear your story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and remember, walking away isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the smartest thing you'll ever do. Wherever you are, whether you're rising, rebuilding, or just catching your breath, I'm rooting for you. Always.